Hello.
Hi, how are you? Hello, Raj. How are you? We can't. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. So good. Let's see. Why don't we go ahead and get an update from Raj? How has the last week been?
Yeah, actually, this whole week I had a lot of projects and pending evaluations, so I couldn't get much work done this week.
Okay.
And look, I will have my end semester examinations at my university for next week, so I'll try to see how much I can work. But this, like, for the next, I think 1 to 2 weeks, it will be a bit difficult.
Okay. Yeah, you said that the path forward was learning a little bit of reinforcement learning, and so have you been able to get
Yes.
into that, or?
I did start getting into that. I did the mathematical parts and concepts required for that, but I couldn't make much progress after that due to my college exams.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, keep at it. uh, and then, yeah, I guess we kind of know, uh, what, where the next steps are. So I guess, what what we'd like to know is like, what exactly is it that we want to do now that you've met with, uh, Himanshu and yeah, with Ankit. If you have like if you need to rescope your project a bit to reflect some of that, that'd be good.
Yeah, yeah, I was thinking about that. I'll try to like document everything I've discussed with them, and then maybe I can start making a new. Like I can start modifying my proposal also, so that it starts to reflect the updated project that we're into.
Okay. Okay, that's good. And I don't see Vrushali today.
I saw you.
Oh, there she is. All right. All right, so never mind then. I love Vrushali.
Hi,
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. Next week I will be attending EDM conference, Educational Data Mining 2023. So I will be busy for next 2 weeks probably.
Right, yeah.
And I was I did a little bit of UI, and I also did add textures in the anatomy model we have, like I have shown you earlier.
Yeah.
Plus, Morris bottom is. Okay. Let me show my thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay. 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 Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I actually made the another lab because that lab was little messy, I thought, and this lab has lots of space. So I was thinking about doing every single thing here with stages. Like if you click on anatomy, the anatomy part will come, and then Morris bottom is like all projects in my single app or whatever you see. I don't know, every single thing. And this has a bot. This is the bot which will give you instruction guide. So I am not training it right now, but I will.
Yeah, that looks
And
nice.
this is the thing I was telling you earlier.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's writing script for this. Here,
Yeah.
that's it. And for UI part, actually I met, where is the assets? User form kind of thing.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, that's it on.
There we go.
Here you can see.
Yeah.
Here, here you can write your name, like the Vrushali, and we will get whole data about the person who is using our project if we deploy it somewhere. So it will be good to track down our progress, whatever we say.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, that looks pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, that looks great. So the idea is to put everything in like a set of like stages where you can use the same environment and go between things.
Yes.
And then you'd have forms like the UI where you could fill in forms and other things like that. Okay. So that's good. Now, what are your plans for this coming? I mean, I know next 2 weeks you might be a little busy, but do you have like, what's the next step? What are the next steps?
Human VR, Maurice Bottom is think like we will be swimming in the pond and our process or our track will be noted down, and that data we will get in Excel sheet. Excel sheet might be the Unity Excel integration. So that's the next thing I am working upon. The sterile water for swimming in for Morris Watermaze experiment and anatomy.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, just keep up the work and yeah, we'll keep going. Yeah, I like this version. It's nice.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So thank you to both of you for giving updates. So I guess Jesse, do you have anything to update us on?
Not really. I'll share the board just to go over that. I do want to kind of keep track of some things here.
Yeah, I think you put a link in the chat.
Yeah, I did.
To follow along.
So I just closed out the meeting with the mantra issue, just so you can see there's the rush, this nice stuff here, just to show this. But yeah, it's nice to have updates like this and use the issues. I made one about. Feel free to add to it, Vrushali, but I put one for the Unity shell that you talked about. I don't really know how to best word that, so feel free to add to that one. It is basically getting time for us to do some of the midterm stuff, both reports and evaluations and all that stuff. So maybe think about that too.
Yeah, this is coming up this next week, so it's well, at least on my end, I have to do evaluations. So that's actually, I think you've assigned that to me. I don't know what the students have to do. I think they have to do one afterwards, but check your email to make sure that you get. If you get an email from the program, you'll have to make sure that you fill out the form, because that keeps the program moving. They'll ding you if you don't fill the form out. So just keep checking your email for whatever they send you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was gonna say too. Because like, it's a little bit confusing sometimes. I get like a bunch of emails from them, and then it's making sure that I'm getting the actionable email from the right person.
Yeah.
Or like I have like, oh, fill out your, your form or evaluation or whatever. So um,
Yeah.
just keep in
So
mind that's that's in that's happening the next week or so.
yeah, there are actually contact people from INCF who usually send out reminders. So
Mm.
it's actually one of the people is one of the old students from DevaWorm. So that's nice. But they'll send out emails and as a reminder because it's you're submitting it to GSoC, but INCF kind of keeps track of it, make sure that we've all done it. So, but um, that's that's okay. Yeah. So that's the forms, midterm reports, midterm evaluations. Okay.
Um, I mean, I can show this too. The website's pretty much set for it's basically there. Um, if there's anything else you want to have added to it, brother, let me know. I think I've got pretty much everybody's stuff here. I wasn't sure what to call. Should they both be the same title for their project for the DevaWorm folks? Or
Yeah, it's the same project. It's just different ways of different approaches. So
yeah,
the project applied to is the same name. So they'll be submitting like the final project will be different. Actually, they have two. Actually, they have a title for their proposal. We could use that too. I have the titles for the proposals. We might do
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me know about that. Otherwise, I think this one's the website's pretty much set, which is nice. Like you can see the whole lineage, so to say, of things. So that's cool. Um, what was that
So that was
second?
that was nice. Let's see that again. It was a lot of work. Thank you for doing that, putting that together. It's very nice. So it's got like everything from like how far down does it go?
We have 2017. I think it's mostly complete. I still have a few formatting changes to make, but basically very simple context of, I want to put links to I know Sam has some stuff here.
Yeah.
Um, and then a very simple guide mentioning Eurostars reaching out to you for like the future. But there's the cohort that I came in.
Yeah.
Um, I uh, I think Maya is the current mentor for Eagle Worm.
Yeah, he's a mentor. Yeah, I mean, like he's doing things largely with Sushmanth on like DevoLearn. Like he's sort of the maintainer for DevoLearn, and then yeah, so
Okay.
he's got that, and then Jiahong is I guess meant like he's working with more with well he's kind of working more with Himanshu, but he's also kind of working on the DevoGraph stuff. So
Okay. Um, however you want all those mentors and stuff qualified, let me know and I'll change it accordingly.
yeah, oh yeah, we could have a mentor layer because I mean it would be nice, yeah, to see like if you have people who came from being a student to being a mentor, that would be nice to demonstrate too.
Yeah. I'll think about how to show that.
Are you on there as a mentor as well, or?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
also put
yeah.
Ankit on there, but I don't know if that's like official or not.
Well, I
I
mean,
don't.
I don't know if it's official, but like if you're serving a role for,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's gonna crypto. Like I listed them here, um, but yeah, okay. Um, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple, but it has a nice, I don't know,
Yeah, it's very nice. It allows us, I think, to like keep that organized and saying this is our history of working on this, and it gives us some credibility, and it actually helps to, maybe revisit some of these things that are in there.
Well,
Like,
yeah. Sometime I'm actually I want to kind of return a bit more to some of the developmental vehicle work we did. But I don't, like, not right now,
right,
for sure. It's been funny to think about it. Even like the pre-trained model stuff, which led to, I think, like a blog post. I should put the blog post here. There's a blog post about that.
yeah,
Not like on the node or whatever that website was,
yeah,
and
like,
just a bunch of stuff here that's not quite fully linked, but is the structures here. So it's cool.
yeah. Why don't you send me that link in like the channel? I think it's the maybe just either DM me or in the Google Summer Code channel, so I can take a look and tell you kind of the things we're missing. Because I mean, there's some links here that we might want. I can give you that information. Mentor stuff, I think, but I mean, overall, it's really good. So
Yeah. There would be a way I can have you comment on the website itself, but for the time being, you can reply here, or like, reply to me however you want.
yeah,
So yeah.
okay,
Okay. As far as other stuff, um, I, I could say a little bit of something professional developmentally, but it's not a rigorous presentation. If you want to present other things, you can do that too. Right?
I don't know. Why don't you go ahead and talk about the professional development stuff? That'd be good.
Um, I'll make a very brief note of it here. Basically, it's about talking to managers, or no, actually, I shouldn't be talking to managers. How to give feedback. Sorry, and it'll just be a very brief uh, discussion. And it came up because one of my friends is having like a somewhat challenging time at their work, and ooh, let me turn this off here. I just want to review this for a second. But basically, they're in a situation where their supervisor is very sure about what they want my friend to do, but the way they talk about it is a bit confusing, and the way they give feedback is a bit destabilizing. So one of the things we kind of talk generally about, all these things to do. We talked about documentation. We talked about, you know, different sorts of communication, writing and expert writing and stuff last time. But it's difficult when and actually, as a side note, this is actually something that came up with. I can't quite show that yet. As a quick tangent, this post is up and live, which is a reflection on We Robot 2022. It's on it's on the
Medium.
Medium page, or our quote unquote publication, or like I wrote it there or whatever. And this was a nice thing, but there's another one forthcoming about some of the stuff from NICWIC 2023, which is, I guess, not an easy way to show it here. Oh, here it is. Yeah,
Yeah, right there.
that's what I'm trying to find. So this post is about the event itself in a broad sense. And there's one of our former interns, Sam, and big nerd right there with me. But there was a specific. I don't think it's here, and it's not supposed to be here. So this is thank you, Bradley, for putting this post together. I'm doing another sort of like recap post from my perspective, similar to the Robot one. And in that, there was a really, really, really great presentation by someone who is a mental health professional, basically. And she basically, it was about like managing burnout at work. And one of the things that came up fits really well with what I'm about to say. And one of the things about, you hear the saying like at work, like people leave their jobs because they don't leave jobs, they leave their boss. They leave their supervisor because their supervisor, it gets weird. They don't know how to, the tension in terms of understanding their expectations and their work gets untenable or uncomfortable. And that tends to be a lot of what makes people leave the job. And that's not a hard and fast rule, but it's something that I think is relevant. And in the NICWIC presentation about burnout, was a lot of, it wasn't maybe the main focus, but one of the conversations I got into during that, and I'll run about in the post that I'm writing about this, is the nature of communicating expectations, and the nature of I'm trying to pull another thing out here. Yeah, the nature of like how you communicate and seek help. And this is actually from the previous year's keynote speaker. And I think this is an amazing chart. I tried to reach out to her, Bradley, about seeing if I could use it or update it. I'm going to kind of like modify it and update it a bit.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a really amazing chart where it kind of explains who you can talk to and what to get. Like your peer is sort of on the same level as you, your manager's above you necessarily, and your mentor may be above you as well, but like what can you do? What can you ask them for? Like your manager, you should, if you're uncertain about expectations, your manager, you should be able to ask very, very often, what are my expectations? You should go to them for clarification about that. And so on and so forth. I won't go through the whole diagram right now, but how does this tie into what I was going to talk about today in terms of how to give feedback? Well, in a very brief sense, I think much like being a good student and kind of being a teacher are a little bit related in some ways. Giving good feedback and also knowing how to solicit feedback from people who maybe aren't good at giving feedback is an important thing. And so there's something called, I don't know if I can find it quickly here. The page method for feedback. Or whoops, I just screwed it up here. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it very easily. So I'll just say it. Sorry, I don't have a good visual right now. But basically, the idea behind it is, oops, I can't pull this up here. Sorry, hold on one more second. Just lost everything I was going to say. Okay, the idea behind this is that when you are, I'll explain it first as if you're giving feedback, which maybe you won't be doing, maybe you aren't in a senior enough role to do it, or you have a teammate. Let's say you're in a situation where you have to give feedback or give an update or kind of inform someone of how to change what they're doing. And then I'll kind of do the reverse of it. But the PAGE method as it is, the PAGE method is basically asking P for permission, and that's about essentially establishing a context for communication. If you kind of just walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, you did this wrong," that's really destabilizing. That's not really it can be kind of unsettling. So permission is essentially related to getting consent to talk about stuff, or saying, "Hey, do you have a minute where I can talk to you?" Finding a space where they'll be able to hear what you have to say, and like kind of letting them know, "Hey, I want to be constructive with you, but there's sort of, something that you want to say." And so I guess I'll put this here. P is for permission. A is for accuracy, in that when you're giving feedback, try to be specific. The more you can identify, I'm thinking about a lot of our conversations, Bradley, in terms of like mechanism and computation. But the more you can kind of identify accurately for someone what needs to change or how to change it, that can help them. Also, you want to kind of reduce ambiguity as much as possible, just so they know. You want to cultivate a sense of agency about it, so they know, okay, if I change this, I will affect the performance in this way. I'll affect the outcome in this way. And that kind of relates to G, which is growth. In that you want to be accurate, but then you want to frame, how does someone grow from this experience? Where do you go with it? So what can you do? What does the future look like where things are better or improved, or that the person has a sense of, okay, I'm still involved, I still belong here, I still can do stuff, but I can grow in this direction, like kind of giving them a sense of what does that growth look like. And then the E is encouragement, that they can go down that path and that they can grow. So this is kind of from the perspective of you giving feedback to someone, as it is written out right here. Going back to my story about my friend who's dealing with a supervisor who's giving kind of strange feedback. It's sort of like, trying to think, what should the model of it look like when it happens? Because if someone's kind of not doing these things, they're not giving you permission, they're being inaccurate, they're not telling you how they grow into it, they're not encouraging you, it can be really destabilizing. And sometimes it's important to know, even just knowing a method of what feedback should look like can give you a little sense of, okay, this is someone managing me in a strange way. This is a supervisor being unclear. Like, I have a right to, expect clarification about my goals, clarification about expectations, and advice on problems, advice on, how do I grow? What let me check the accuracy of the situation that I'm getting feedback about, and like all this stuff should be on the table. So when you're receiving feedback and you're not getting feedback that looks something like this, where there isn't permission, where there isn't accuracy or growth, especially, it's okay to let's say request that, or understand that you deserve to have that in some ways. And I feel like this chart on the side that I mentioned before can kind of help too. Like, the manager is probably going to be the person to most accurately give you the feedback about accuracy and growth, but you can try to get some context from a peer or a mentor about what happened too. And you can't dictate that your manager or your supervisor is going to give you this great feedback, but understanding that there's a dialogue about feedback that could or should happen, I think is a really important thing to keep in mind. And it's not always talked about. Like, it's not always really explained, oh, you should be able to get this from a situation. And kind of just understanding to what degree it's like a personal problem or a manager's problem or not. And to go back to the NICWIC 2023 burnout session at work, um, one of the biggest parts of burnout was not being clear about what the expectations were, and then making sure that, trying to understand that if a situation at a job or work is pressuring you to do a lot of has a strange sense of your boundaries or is not managing expectations well, um, that it can be, that's a major cause for burnout. And if you're feeling burned out because of that, it's not just because you need to work harder and you're doing a bad job. It can be because the management is not handling giving you feedback, not managing expectations well too. So that's a very brief kind of impromptu overview. But I think it's important to kind of have that on the table, and you can look into that more and ask us more questions later, um, outside of this little conversation here. So I don't know if anybody have any questions or comments or your thoughts, Bradley, but okay.
So in the page methods, you had permission. So what does permission mean? I wasn't clear on that.
Ideally, and this page is kind of from the perspective of a manager. So ideally, if a manager's following the page method, they're going to say, I'll act like I'm talking to myself. Like, hey, let's say I'm managing Joe Pro, which is a company, but like, hey, Joe Pro, do you have a minute? I wanted to talk to you about something. I wanted to kind of go over that report or the project. And it's basically the point of permission is kind of alerting someone there's something you want to say, and also kind of modeling. I don't necessarily want to say it's sort of modeling consent in a way, but also like giving someone a space to say, giving them sort of warning, but also inviting them to a space where they have some like agency, they have some boundaries, they can say yes or no, say, oh, I'm really busy right now. Obviously as a manager, in some ways you have to dictate what happens, but permission, modeling that you can ask for permission in the context of this is a really great way to kind of engender trust. And also, like, if you don't, the opposite, like if you don't ask for permission and you just say, hey, Jesse, you did something wrong, you should have done this differently, and you kind of just walk up to someone and start telling them, it can be very destabilizing. It can be very distracting. It can also it can make someone feel like, oh, I got to be on guard all the time because I don't know if my manager is going to give me a space to talk about stuff. If they're just going to come up to me and drop something on me, that's going to be a really uncomfortable situation at work. So the permission part is basically asking for a space or saying, inviting someone and modeling, hey, if I'm going to tell you something that's maybe difficult or really important about you or about something else, I'm going to show you that I'm going to like invite you to that space as opposed to forcing you to be there. And that's a huge thing for like trust, for dialogue, for understanding that you can be open and having a sense of respect. So that's kind of what permission's about.
And then from the perspective of the reviewee, I guess, so they're just like kind of responding to these page points. So if you're an effective manager, you use these 4 principles to sort of give your feedback, and then the reviewee actually sort of incorporate. I mean, are there any guidelines or principles for the reviewee that are kind of in that same vein?
What I would say, I don't know how to say that.
There we go.
What I would say is like, when you're getting feedback, I think, and it's really tough. I would say one of the biggest things I would say, kind of at a personal level, is when you're getting feedback from a manager, there's a lot of pressure put in the situation. Like this is a side note. and this is a personal comment and not necessarily career advice. I'm very, very, very particular about when people use a situation to like emotionally boost themselves at your expense. Like if a manager's giving you a hard time to vent their own stress or to make themselves feel better, I think that's kind of bad practice in general, but it's also like it can be harder when you don't have a lot of experience to know what that is. Over time, you can be really clear when someone's like kind of being a jerk to you or whatever. And it's tough because sometimes you don't have a lot of power or feedback. And like if your boss or the CEO of a place is being really having a bad day, and taking it out on somebody and it's you, it's a tough situation. So that's kind of like some real talk. And if that happens a lot, it can force people out of a job. Or there's a lot of, there's a lot of tricky things about that aren't easy to talk about in this nice model that I'm talking about. So I'm kind of just saying that's, that's part of real life stuff that can be difficult. And what you will find, and I say especially in academia, it's a premium to find advisors who really care about this, because some really don't, and you should be wary about that. If you're going to like, this is a whole other conversation, but if you're going to graduate programs, if you're getting a PhD advisor, if you're working with somebody for your thesis, you should vet them. You should really try to understand, do they want to be a mentor, or do they want someone to just dump on and do their, cheap labor for? There's a big difference. So that's all like other conversations to have down the road. But to go back to Bradley's question, what do you do as someone who's receiving feedback? I feel like the most important thing as someone receiving feedback is showing, it's always, if it's uncomfortable things, like if you screw it up or did something wrong, that's uncomfortable and that's okay. Like I feel like knowing that it's okay for you to feel a little down or like, oh man, I screwed up. Ideally, the supervisor or the work situation will basically be supportive of that. Like it's okay to expect support in that. That being said, what really is an amazing thing, and this is something I look for people I work with, I manage different teams and people. What's an amazing thing is like, if you can, it's okay to be uneasy or uncomfortable or nervous. That's fine. Like, and that's even expected, especially if it's like harder news or like not even if it's like, oh, we're changing how your department's structured and we want to keep you, but XYZ. Like, there's all sorts of conversations where the uneasiness and the tension is understood. But what's really interesting, I feel like, is kind of the A and the G part of it, like the accuracy and the growth, and particularly in terms of understanding major business and project goals. Like, if you can deal with the unpleasantness of the situation and understand, okay, if you can frame it in terms of getting the feedback, understanding the accuracy or the growth both of yourself and as the project or whatever, if you can relate it to major goals that are at hand, like maybe in the context of this lab or Google Summer of Code, it's like, oh man, I really messed up with this stuff, but I know that if I do this thing right, I'll make this, I'll have an improvement of this, this feature, and this feature is really important. And I know people in the past struggle in this feature, and I know it's a really hard feature, but I understand that, dealing with this feature or this development really matters to the business goal of whatever it is. Like if you can frame things in a way where you understand what the people leading the project are concerned about, that's a huge thing. And I'm saying CEO, but it could be the PI or whatever. But like, if you can understand accuracy of the specific task, and also how growth or your improvement in that area will affect not only the project at the level that you're dealing with it at, which could be just a code or how you're arranging some kind of minor detail. If you can keep in mind a certain bigger picture that other people are looking at and demonstrate that, or ask questions, like if you don't know, asking questions, if you can ask questions over time to kind of get that model of what it is that the CEO, the decision makers are looking at in terms of, oh, we value X, Y, Z, but we also want to prioritize. Maybe right now it's the moment we need to prioritize getting this out fast, or we need to prioritize making this feature more than that feature. Like if you can put your context, if you can understand or communicate along the context of what a major business or project goal is, that helps the people giving you feedback trust you to know, okay, I can give Jesse feedback and he's going to be able to deal with that, but he also understands the main part of what we're going about, as opposed to being distracted by the feedback or overly trying to spend too much time on XYZ. And this is kind of relates to, again, the expectations, the dialogue, the performance, and trust in what that's all about. Like, you know, in a healthy environment, there's clear communication about roles and expectations and what the bigger picture is and how someone can, okay, if I do this, I am helping the main cause. But if that's not clear in a situation, you can try to ask about it, and ideally you'll get feedback about that. So that's kind of maybe a bit long-winded response, but I think as a reviewee, if you can show that you care about accuracy and growth, and in terms of, oh, I really want to understand what the situation is totally well, and I want to improve in this way, and then also frame it in terms of, yes, and I understand some of the major things we're trying to do with this project or in this company right now are XYZ. That will help people know that giving you feedback is like they will try to give you better feedback if they know that you care about what the big stuff is too. The end.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, thank you for that. I think that was very useful to, just kind of to understand how, and I think for Shali and Raj, you're going to be working in an organization, other organizations where they have, like, we don't have a very strong hierarchical organization here, but there are other organizations where you might work in where you have multiple managers. And when you have multiple managers, you really need to be clear on which person is, they're going to be contradictory. And even in academia, you're going to get, especially in academia, you're going to get people where they just don't communicate at all. It's not even a matter of being just malicious, but just being a poor communicator. And that happens, and it's not even like because that happens in industry too, where people are contradictory and they kind of don't tell you, like they don't have a framework like this where they can really clearly state. And I'm guilty of this too. I mean, we don't, sometimes when you have projects that are evolving, it's like you just don't have a clear goal as to where it's going in 5 years. That's fine, but like, you have to work around that, and you have to kind of give feedback in a way that's useful, at least somewhat. So, I mean, this is something that I think is great to have because it really does help people, I think, give and receive feedback that's useful.
I think absolutely to all that. And I feel like, I know I've kind of said this before, but it's so, there's a certain kind of literacy that you get over time when you realize, because I'm trying to figure out the simplest way to say it, but just as Bradley said, there's a really critical sort of experience you will get over time of understanding, oh boy, am I really clueless about what's going on, or is the person communicating expectations to me a bad communicator and they don't know? And that's a major line of tension. And it takes many different forms. Like It can be poor communication. It can be someone in academia who is, holy crap, I don't know if I'm going to get my grant funded or not, and I don't know if I can do this project, and I can't tell you right now, and I don't know what to say, and I'm stressed. Like, that's a very common thing. And absolutely about multiple managers, a workplace too, a potential contradiction. And sometimes you'll be in a tough spot about that. And I feel like the best thing you can do is learn how to, the more you can get experience with understanding what feedback should look like, and also understanding what clear descriptions should look like and how things should be, what it looks like, the more you can kind of, I almost call it like, I'm actually building this out a bit, obviously, as you can maybe tell, and like some of the Joe Pro mentoring stuff I'm trying to do is like, what is this literacy? Because it's sort of like you have to have a model of what feedback or business communication, organizational communication should look like. And then you can say, is this happening or not? Because it can be really stressful if you don't know, or if you think, oh, I'm really missing all the time, and you know, maybe over time you realize, actually no, someone was really stressed out today, something happened, and they're scattered, and their communication to you just isn't very good, and it's all of those things. So it's very much an art. It is not a science. This is an art, and it's confusing, and you can have these models, but a lot of it's experience and just talking about it and finding people you can talk to about it with, which I think why this chart is so great, because you kind of need to be a little bit on point with your manager. Maybe you can have a great relationship with your manager, but a lot of times stuff will happen at work that you'll talk about with your peer that you trust and a mentor that you trust to get feedback about the context that you don't have. And that's why it's great to have a peer and a mentor that can give you some of the context too. Yeah. But more about that other times.
All right. All right. Thank you, Jesse. Let's move on to, I have a number of things I want to talk about here in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that was a bit
that's
much.
fine. That's fine. Just kind of a hodgepodge of things here, so I don't want to take too much time. But the first thing I wanted to point out was I got this message today from the one of the main people in OpenWorm. Kind of, he's paying attention to these things. So it looks like OpenWorm's GitHub repository is on the top of Hacker News. So Hacker News, of course, is a news aggregator. Like, they have posts, and it's number one in trends, I guess, today. So this is the GitHub repository, and we didn't talk too much about what OpenWorm has to offer in this group, but there is, of course, the browser, which we've seen, but there is actual code. There's the OpenWorm code, which if you go to the OpenWorm repository, which is github.com/OpenWorm, there's a Docker file which has all of the simulations kind of in sort of a runtime mode. So you can go and get the Docker container and install it on your computer, and you can run all the simulations in serial. So you have, like, you start with one, you start with another, and it goes through all the simulations. But you can also download the open source code. You can look at the details of it, and you can do things. I actually saw someone the other day. This was a while back, but it was posted, I think, on social media the other day, where someone had built, taken the OpenWorm simulation and put it into a room simulator, and they had like a thing where it was like C. elegans destroys its bedroom. Had like a bedroom with a C. elegans in it, and it was destroying the furniture, and it was kind of a cool simulation, just something that someone came up with. But I think there's a lot of interest with OpenWorm with just kind of the simulation aspect. This is something that I'm kind of wary about, because I think there's a tendency to think that they're sort of replicating the brain of a worm, and it's not necessarily, the point isn't emulation so much, it's modeling. But I mean, I think there are a lot of opportunities to integrate OpenWorm's code base with, like, maybe some AI techniques, like maybe large language models or deep learning models that we haven't explored. So or even virtual world models. So I think this is a nice thing to see, and it's a good opportunity to utilize that code in new ways. So last week we talked about synthetic data, and I forgot to present this paper or this article from Unity blog. And this talks about getting started with 3D content for synthetic data. And they talk about using synthetic data for building 3D models. So, again, computer vision systems use synthetic data. There are opportunities for, it's hard to get data on things. So in our Saturday meeting, we talked about digital twinning. And so in order to build digital twins, you need to have very good data about like all aspects of a thing, an object or a person even, or something else in the world. And so it's very hard to build those models because you need to have very detailed models on the meshes and the textures and the animations, how things move. And so if you don't have data about that, you can approximate this. But of course, the approximation is hard to do. You have to create a data set based on maybe the things that you know about that thing. So, like we can take the worm as an example. We know that it undulates. We know it has some stereotypical behaviors. We can build a data set that basically simulates those movements, using different mathematical functions, generating data points, and then build a model of movement. Does it give you all the possible movements and variations of movement? No, but it does give you a good approximation. And so this is what we really want. And so in the film and video game industries, they have had these kind of problems where they need to do like special effects or other things, and they don't have they have an n of 1 maybe, or they have an n of 0 if it's like they're trying to model explosions in space. I mean, we kind of know something about that, but we don't know in the context that they're creating a movie and say they're just, trying to, create a movie about, there's a ship that explodes in interstellar space. We don't really have data on that, so it's not going to, you can't really just draw from some data set. So these are things that we want to be able to approximate and use in it looks something that looks good enough. So you can scan objects, you can do 3D scanning, but sometimes those scans are kind of just giving you the surface of something, or it's hard to get some of the technologies we have had up to this point are very limiting in terms of what they can get, although the technologies are getting there. So, there are a lot of aspects of 3D scanning that are kind of limiting. You have to get the thing just right, and you're not going to capture some parts of the object. So you'll need to sort of merge those areas with, overlapping areas with synthetic data. So there are a lot of opportunities to use synthetic data in 3D modeling, and it kind of leads us to some of these questions about what we can do more generally with synthetic data. Where is it appropriate? So synthetic, I did a little bit of modeling of synthetic variables. So we were talking about you can measure something in, say, an open source community, like number of users over time, or we might model number of commits across like a community. And so we get, basically we're getting numbers. We can get those numbers from GitHub. But again, this is a case where the data is going to be incomplete or sometimes not accessible to us, at least in the form we wanted. So we can actually model these things using distributions. And so this is an example of a Gaussian distribution of 10,000 data points. So basically there are functions in Python and in MATLAB. This was actually created in Scilab, which is an open source version of MATLAB. And basically you have this distribution of points. So what I would do is say, I want to model this variable. How many contributions are there in my community over a certain amount of time, or just in general, if I just take a look at one point in time and I see what those look like. Well, the first thing I need to do is decide what is the distribution I expect of those. Is it going to be a normal distribution, or is it going to be something else? Now, in this case, I assumed that it was going to be a normal distribution. So it's basically a Gaussian function, which has, of course, the normal shaped bell curve with tails that go out a certain number of standard deviations, and then you have outliers. But like I said last week, we don't necessarily care about outliers in a case like this. And so what I can do is I can just simply say, what is my expected mean and what is my expected standard deviation? And so if I can capture the mean and the standard deviation, which you don't know necessarily, you could maybe, if you had a very small data set, you could estimate it. You could say, well, okay, let's say I have 10 points, but I need more really to make a good model. So let's just say that I have 10 points, I get the mean of 10, I get the standard deviation of those 10, and that's a very incomplete picture. So it's just a smattering of this distribution. But what I want to do is I want to resample those parameters, and I want to build more data points around that according to this distribution. So I've built this Gaussian distribution with 10,000 points based on that mean in a standard deviation. It's actually a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1, which is a standard set of parameters, but you can set those any way you want. And then you get this distribution of points, and you can visualize it here, but you can use this to inform your model. So you can plug those values into your model to test the hypothesis, to test to say, if my mean is 10, or if my mean is 8, in my, I expect a certain standard deviation, which you can estimate, or you can just propose that the standard deviation is, usually it's a normal standard deviation is 1, but you can expand it out and say you think you have more variability in your community. Then you can have something like this, and you can draw from this distribution, sample from it for different, maybe like I want to take 100 samples out of it and see what their value is. Or I want to plug this into a simulation and see what it's doing, how it behaves. And then you can evaluate maybe from the simulation if the thing looks reasonable. So a lot of this, there's statistics that you can do on a distribution like this that you couldn't do on just a kind of a smattering of observations, or if you have no observations at all, you just need to take a really good guess. This is an exponential distribution. This is different. This is not assuming a normal distribution of points. In this case, we have a lot of outliers in this long tail. And then, we have only a few really large values. So, this is good for things, different types of distributions are good for different types of systems or problems. And so we can actually model a number of different distribution types, but we need different parameters for this. So this has, I think, a mean value, and then you have you assume it's exponentially distributed, which means it has a lot of outliers in the tail. So there are a lot of time-dependent processes that follow this distribution. And so, if we're creating synthetic data, we need to think about the distribution we want to use. We have to think about what the descriptive parameters are, like the mean and the standard deviation, and maybe even some other parameters that we don't. And depending on the distribution, we have other parameters that we want to think about or test. And so the point of this is to take maybe like a good guess or a small amount of data and expand it to this larger sample so we can make statements about what's going on. So I think that's a good, I'm not going to give the code here, but this can be implemented in a number of different programs. It's not like a thing that's particularly hard to do. It's just that you have to have the right method down for it. And then, taking those data, which you'll have from the simulation, and plugging them, or you resample the data, and then you can say plug it into a simulation, or you can analyze it and see, what they look like. Finally, and I'm just going to talk about this briefly. I'll probably come back to this next week. I had this idea for years about relativity and testing hypotheses of relativity in virtual worlds, or using relativity in a virtual environment. So I have a bunch of readings here. I'll go over these next week. But basically the idea is that we have relativity here. It's basically where you're the observer and you're observing things in the world, and depending on your point of view, they look different, or the properties of the thing are different. So this is Han and Greedo. This is a site that's like different relativity simulations. This is the Han and Greedo problem. This is where, if you're familiar with Star Wars, Han and Greedo shoot at each other, and then there's a question of who shot first. And then this is Luke at the bottom, and he's observing, he's moving at a constant velocity, and he's observing Han and Greedo from different perspectives. So if he's at this end, it looks like Han shot first. If he's at this end, it looks like Greedo shot first. So there's, there are a lot of interesting problems around relativity. You have other ones like, this will come up. Okay, we'll do next. So yeah, this shows like different, if the observer is different reference frames, things look differently, or you can get different answers of what's going on in the world that you're in. So they've actually created something called open relativity, and the reason I bring this up is because it's a toolkit in Unity that you can use to create different simulations of relativistic phenomena, especially with respect to the speed of light and what happens when you change the speed of light, or what happens when you change some of these other space-time parameters. And so it's really interesting work. I put out a paper like about 12 years ago where this idea of relativistic virtual worlds. And the framework at the time, I couldn't implement it. No one had implemented any of this kind of stuff really at a decent level. But open relativity came out around maybe 2012 to 2016, and that's where this started to emerge as a way to do game development. Incorporate this stuff into game development, but also into virtual worlds. There's this open relativity project repository where you can go and download some of these things. You have assets, and this is actually this is a spin-off of the MIT Game Lab's a slower speed of light. So this is a thing that they developed in the MIT Game Lab, and then they developed this open source toolkit. So it's definitely something that can be done in open source. We can use this for like research. We can use this for just kind of fun games, and for looking at maybe how people perceive different reference frames or perceive things relative to the speed of light. In the paper, the archive paper here I worked out some of these issues with sensory phenomena. Not as well as I would have liked, but that's kind of an aside. You can also use it for education. So you can use it to teach special relativity using virtual reality. There's this paper on, looking at relativity in virtual environments, and it kind of gives you an opportunity to get a sort of a unique sense of what relativity is. If I explain to you relativity and I show you the math, it may be a little bit difficult to understand what's going on, but if I show you these effects in a virtual world, it's much easier to understand what's going on. So this is a high degree of usefulness for education as well. And then there's this video. This is from YouTube. I'm not gonna play it, but it's basically this video on what if light were really slow, and it kind of plays this out in a virtual environment where, what are the effects of slowing down the constant of the speed of light, the c. And so if you slow down c as a constant in your equations of relativity, you have different effects in the real world. So you can actually see it. You can model these things and show their effects. You wouldn't be able to necessarily do this in a real world experiment, but you can do that in a virtual world. So I wanted to just point that out. We'll come back to that next week. But it's something I'm kind of working on that in my head. I'm not really sure what to do with it yet. But yeah, so that's all for today. Any other questions or comments? Yeah. Vrushali says learning in VR will be very interesting within the next decade. Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of opportunities to do interesting things there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there in terms of creating different, towards different embodiments and different interpretations of things, and even thinking about like some of your like the super sampling work and does kind of changes too. But yeah, good stuff. Not a lot more to say, but look forward to that conversation.
All right. Thanks for attending. See you next week. Oh yeah, I'll share the links in the Slack.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye. Thanks. Bye.